And so now we'll get to the best part of the presentation, probably our guest speakers that we have. And next slide. So we are going to start with Northwest Missouri State University, and we have Dr. Allison Hoffman. She serves as the Assistant Vice President of Admissions and Student Success at Northwest Missouri State University. And in her role, Dr. Hoffman oversees the units of admissions, operations and recruitment, financial assistance and scholarships, and academic success and retention, including co-leading institutional student success and retention, persistence, and completion initiatives like Degrees When Due. And during Dr. Hoffman's professional career at Northwest, she has served as Director of Academic Success and Retention Unit, a Senior Instructor for the Booth School of Business, Director of the University Seminar Program, and a Provost Fellow at Northwest Missouri State University. She also holds a bachelor's and a master's degree from West State University and a doctorate of business administration from the University of Incarnate Word. And then joining her is Egon Heidendal, Assistant Vice President of Institutional Research and Effectiveness, and he has over 11 years of experience in institutional research at Northwest Missouri State University, and is a member of various campus teams, including leading the data efforts for Northwest participation in Degrees When Due. He also holds a Bachelor in Communications and Multimedia Design from, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Zayed University in the Netherlands, so forgive me for that, as well as a Master's in Business Administration from Northwest Missouri State University. And currently he's working on his dissertation through the University of Missouri to receive an ED in Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis. So welcome to both our guest speakers today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, thank you. So we just wanted to start and tell a little bit about our story and some of our wins with our Degrees When Due initiative. And so if you want to head on to the next slide, I will let Egon do a little bit of an overview of our institution.
So yeah, Northwest Missouri State University is a four-year public institution. We are moderately selective. What that truly means in the state of Missouri is that we aim for students who have an ACT of 21 or higher. That's kind of our main group of students that we accept. Almost every institution in Missouri kind of does an 80-20 split. We try to accept 20% of our students below our admission standards to grant some more access. There are over 10 plus public four-year institutions in the state of Missouri. It's highly competitive. Our current enrollment, we just had our census yesterday, but we are over 7,800 students. And there's about 5,300 undergraduate students as well as 2,500 graduate students. And I think over the last 3 years or 4 years, our retention rate's been averaging right there around that 75.5%. And our graduation rate is around 52%. Next slide, please.
All right, so just talking a little bit about our Degrees When Due timeline. We started this project in January of 2020, and we were excited about this project really because it aligned a lot with some other initiatives that we had ongoing, and we were part of the Missouri cohort that was taking part in this initiative. And so we just saw it as a great opportunity for us to, analyze some of our students that stopped out, that didn't complete a degree, and give us an opportunity to really have some challenging conversations on our campus once we looked at the data from these students. And so we got going on that, and then, well, pretty much the world stopped, right, for all of us in March 2020. So some of our institutions that were in our cohort, they decided to kind of pause and not really move on with the initiative. We went ahead and kept going. We were very focused on enrollment and being in rural Midwest or the rural Midwest. We definitely don't have the plethora of students maybe that there are in California. We would love to get some of your students, though, to migrate over here to Missouri, but we definitely are. There's a lot of competition in the Midwest for very few students. And so we wanted to really look at that data and have those conversations. And so we continued on and thought of it as a way with our new online programs, some new degree offerings that we had, really to re-engage our adult students. And so we've worked through that. We never really paused, and we are just reaching the point where I think Egon submitted our final data. So that's a kind of an exciting time to reach that. But we want to share with you some of how we've used, what we learned from the project and give you some ideas to help along the way. Next slide. All right, Egon, do you want to talk a little bit about our report that we created and we're really going to highlight today?
Yes, so we created a final report that kind of highlighted all of the actions we took, and we kind of knew going into the project that we wanted to do this at the end. And so everything we did in the project kind of had that end goal in mind, that made our storytelling a little easier. But in that, we kind of defined to everybody what that universe of interest is. We review how we explain how we reviewed the data, what our practices were, our takeaways, and then at the end, we also have recommendations to move forward. And since our audience here was really our senior leaders at the institution, that's our Northwest leadership team is our highest team at the institution, the president's cabinet in a way, and our senior leadership teams, all our assistant vice presidents and all our associate provosts. Since that's such a high audience, we wanted to make sure we kept that to a 2-page brief for them. We have a larger way of reporting this out to other audiences, but for that audience, we really want to get it down to 2 pages. Next slide, please.
All right, so one thing that I'm sure all of you are incredibly busy, and that's what we find at our institution too. We're so busy and we're honestly so lean that we're moving from one initiative to the next initiative. And so we felt like it was really important to ensure that we took the time to kind of tell our story, if you will, what we learned from our data, what we recommended to move forward, and so on. There are times when I'll admit, like in my role, I'm just moving on to the next thing, and we don't spend as much time on this summary part. And so I think this was something we tried to do, because if you haven't been along the Degrees When Due journey, which our core team was, but not our whole campus, it's a little bit difficult to explain what all happened. And so this format gave us a way to do that. And so we started, of course, like we would any executive summary, by just kind of the high level, because as Egon mentioned, we knew we're going to get a quick read from our leadership team on this. So we wanted them to know about our project and what, our universe of interest looked like. And so it was that 8 years worth of data. It was students that, enrolled or were not enrolled elsewhere and had at least 90 hours of credit or more. One thing that Egon probably we didn't mention when we talked about our graduation rate is we have a number of majors that essentially have to transfer out to complete. So we don't have a nursing program. We don't really have any medical programs. So a lot of times our students do go 2 years here, even though we're a bachelor's grading institution, and master's, they will come the first 2, do a pre-program, and then go on maybe somewhere else. And so when we look at our student achievement measure number, it's more around 76%. So we knew we weren't going to have a huge number of students in here because we tracked this somewhat, but we knew we would have some when we wanted to learn more about those students. So we ended up with 453 that fell between the eligible or the potential commuter. And then, of course, the initiative for us resulted so far in 27 degrees being awarded. And we're going to give you some tips along the way about what you can do to probably be able to continue on with the project, even when you're done with the data reporting part. And I think you can move to the next slide. Egon, do you want to talk a little bit about the universe of interest?
Yes, so one thing that we did in that final report too is what you see here, is talk about the universe of interest, and kind of give those bullet points. It's kind of what we're doing here as well, of who was in that. So 22 students were identified as eligible and were able to get their degrees, and we awarded 21 of the 22 eligible students. Unfortunately, one of our students had deceased. 95% of the eligible students fell between the ages of 25 and 44. These are just some stats. 73% of the eligible students were identified as Pell Grant recipients. 59 of the eligible students were male. 86% of them had that GPA between the 2.0 and the 2.99. And then 41 of the eligible students had what was classified as a non-academic barrier to graduation. So they had completed their academic work, and the incomplete graduation paperwork was the most common non-academic barrier. And I think also you probably have some stories from some specific students related to that.
I'll talk about those in just a bit. If you want to go ahead, Egon, and do the next universe of interest slide, and then I'll kind of take on the stories from there.
Yep, and so we had in the universe of interest 426 students that were identified as potential completers. So these were really the ones that still had some academic work left or had other things that they had to complete, and we were able to reach out to 89% of those. 5 students re-enrolled and completed their degree within this initiative. We still have some enrolled now that are working towards it, so that number should still go up, which is those 4 students recently re-enrolled. 14% needed 1 to 6 credit hours, 13% needed 7 to 14 credit hours, but 72% of students really needed more than a semester, 15 plus credit hours. And 25% of potential completers were identified to have some kind of financial hold or owe money. And I think 78% of those that owed money were identified as Pell Grant eligible students, and that was a high percentage.
So as we met as a committee, we talked, as we started to look at our students and look at what we wanted to do, there were some things that we wanted to pilot as part of this process. And so these were what we called practices. So our core team, we won't go into all of who was included, but it was a cross-functional team. And so we, were given permission, if you will, or authority to pilot the practices that you see here. And so for our degrees when due students that were identified, and we identified those with a banner code. And I have that on here, and that's probably one of the biggest things that we could tell you or suggest that you do if you're a banner school, and if you're PeopleSoft or something else, maybe another way to do it. But for our universe of interest, we went in and put an attribute on those students. And so that then allowed us to run daily reports to see if students were, being picked up through our communication. Did they apply to the institution again? And so it really helped us to be able to track the student group, and it's something that we can do in the future. So again, if I were to say like one thing that when we did it, we didn't realize how much it helped us. Super critical for us though was this attribute. So definitely one of the things that we would recommend. That was a key piece. We waived our grad fee. We went ahead and just had our registrar's office really do that. We have some programs that have what we call unique institutional requirements. So we have some majors that require a C or better in every single major course. And so what we found from our universe of interest, and one of our takeaways, that in one of these particular majors, which does have high enrollment, we saw a lot of students with 1D. So 1D is what kept them from graduating. And so we were able through this practice to waive one unique institutional requirement that was really around that. So our students, in some cases, some of them had gone and taken this, a same class maybe 3-4 times, and it was a D in that one class, and that's what held them up. So that was pretty eye-opening, and we still have more conversation really to have on some of that. And so you can see kind of some of our other practices on there. We were part of the Dana Center Math Pathways project, and so we felt it was important to incorporate that in. So our students who had completed a math and they were only missing math, we were able to then substitute in a math for that. And so I think that was definitely another good one that aligned with our work that was ongoing. And so then we also went in and added another attribute when the student completed their degree. So we added one that was whether the student was eligible for degrees when due, and we had ineligible. And ineligible for us, and you guys would obviously define this however you want, were students that weren't allowed to come back to the institution. So it could have been, like they had a Title IX issue, a discipline issue, whatever it might be. We wanted to make sure to identify who those students were so that we weren't communicating with them and then they really weren't eligible to come back to the institution. So that was a key for us. And so then we went through, that made it super easy at the end for those that had completed a degree then or were awarded through this process, that we were able to pull reports. And so for Egon, that was kind of a breeze when we were giving him a list of who had this code from Banner, and then we're on to our next reporting piece. So you can go ahead and move forward. And Egon, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So some of our takeaways from this is that often the students had that outstanding paperwork, right? Like I talked earlier about the most common one being just a graduation application was missing or something. And sometimes the students actually thought they had graduated already. They just never got the award because they missed this one step, but they found a job and everything. And some of them were actually shocked to find out they hadn't officially graduated, but luckily now they did. The other piece that Allison already, the second bullet there is kind of what Allison already alluded to, is that they were often just one course grade off. And so through the special project, we were able to waive that. The other big piece is that we finally started offering a Bachelor's of Science in General Studies. And that was one we did not offer in the past. And that was really a pathway to a lot of students who had taken over 120 credit hours to finally find that degree that fit them and get them to complete. That was a big eye opener and is really helping us complete our students on time now. And then sometimes their degree often had just an incomplete grade in their final course. So they thought they'd met all the requirements for that course. Faculty member though gave them an incomplete and they ended up not graduating and nobody followed up with them. So that's just something we've learned as well to keep an eye out for now.
Yeah. And I would just add one thing to that before we go to the next slide, is that the bullet where we had the students that didn't complete for a unique institutional requirement like that C or better, that often went with bullet 1, which is also the common paperwork. So when our students apply for graduation and don't complete, then they have to go ahead and apply for graduation again. And so they weren't showing up on anyone's radar again as not completing. So we've had some conversations about what we can do, and we have some systems in place now to be able to ensure that those don't fall between the cracks. And that really has to do with our advising model. We have a primarily faculty-based advising model. And so these students would, sometimes the faculty advisor would reach out, but then if they didn't complete that next semester, they'd kind of just fall off the rate. They just fall between the cracks, if you will. And so that was a little bit of an eye opener for us too. Go to the next one. So as we just kind of wrap this part up with our actions, we just talked about what do we do now and how do we continue on after this. And so those piloted practices that we put in place, we are now determining, hey, which one of those can we continue on? And we're encouraging some that are out of our control, so need to be in the faculty decision-making process. We're showing them the data and encouraging them to have those conversations and to change those policies moving forward. And so we're able to do that by showing the data of who didn't graduate and why they didn't graduate. And we have some others that are just more around reminders to advisors and things. In Missouri, we have a number of initiatives that help students complete. So if they're in certain majors and they're trying to complete their degree, there's some funds available for them. And so we're going to set up a web page that kind of has all of those resources, because a lot of times our students do have financial problems, but they don't necessarily know where to go or who to talk to. If they don't get the right answer initially, they don't know what other kinds of resources might be out there to help them. And so that will help us with that piece. And then we have a new student success system, which will help us with some of those alerts in the graduation paperwork, as we talked about. But we really learned that any of our students that have quite a few hours and aren't enrolled elsewhere, our general studies program is really a game changer for us in terms of trying to re-engage adult students. And so we are going to continue those efforts outside of our universe of interest per se, and try to get students re-engaged to complete from there. And then next slide is our recommendations, and we'll wrap it up. And Egon, do you want to talk about this one? I think I probably hit on a few of these, but you can feel free to wrap it up if you'd like.
Yep, I think one of the things that we learned from the beginning is we really took a close look at the template. And so when we started the project, everything we did was around the data reporting template. So we knew that we would have the data at the end. And we found the template very useful. So we're actually going to continue to use that to keep tracking those students of 90+ hours. Everything we did in this project, we stored all of our data processes, how to pull these reports, all of that. So if Allison, this upcoming spring says, hey, who are the new students? We have the report ready to go. We just have to run it, and we have the additional students to go look at. And that was kind of our intent from the beginning. We didn't want this to be a one-off. We're also going to continue looking at those practices. Allison kind of said that. We have to work with our faculty senate for some of those that are faculty-driven processes, but we now have data to inform them. We're also going to form a committee that is going to continue this work moving forward. And then the biggest thing really is trying, and we often don't do a good job of this, but it's telling our own story. But we want to do an interview with one of our students who graduated through this, do some press releases on that, and highlight the program, and that we're going to continue doing this work for our students. So with that, I would really open it up to any questions anybody has.
Thank you so much, Allison and Egan. We really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions out there, you can either type them in chat, or I think we're a small enough group that you could probably just unmute and ask as well.
Hi, I'm Stacy, and I have a question.
Great.
Hi, so my question goes back to your Bachelor of Science in General Studies. You added that degree so that you could have completers, right? Did I understand that right?
We added that degree. We didn't add it as part of this project, if you will, but we've added it recently. And that was just something, we did not have any type of general studies, any type of degree like that. It was all very, specialized from an academic department or area. And so this allowed our students to choose 3 areas and complete 18 hours of upper division coursework in those three areas and complete. And most of those that were short on hours in our degree when due project could finish any remaining classes from one of those areas at least online. So that helped. We found most of them, they had 2. So they'd almost have 2 areas done just, from kind of moving around, doing different things. And so we were able to be somewhat flexible in those as well, working with our chairs and directors to approve substitutions for courses and things.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So we do have a question that came in via chat from Danielle. She'd like to learn more about the communication plan that you use to reach students.
Yeah. Great question. Egon, do you want this one or you want me to take it?
I think you're more familiar with that part.
Okay, great. So what we did, as we mentioned, was put that code on for our students. And so we sent out our universe of interest to various offices to ensure who is eligible and who is ineligible. And we didn't have many ineligible, but there were a few. And so we wanted to make sure to get that right code on there so that we weren't sending out communications to the group that wasn't eligible. We also ran our student names through our admissions process and our admission software. We're able to get addresses of our students. And so we were pretty sure that no email address that we had on file was going to work anymore. And so we were able to look at these students and run them against that mail system and find addresses for them. And there were a few that we weren't able to find, but for the most part we were. And that also helped us identify who was deceased. So that system helped us because it was very important to us that we did not send something out to someone who is known to be deceased. I know it can happen for anyone. I know others have worked with their alumni offices. Our system, we were able to kind of do that through our mail system. And so then what we did was we really sent out a postcard. We also then notified students, the eligible students we handled a little bit differently. The eligible students, we did phone calling and different things for that group because that was a different conversation to us. It was like, hey, you're eligible for this degree. It's not, we want you to re-enroll. It's you're eligible without doing anything else. And so that group was a little bit different. And our registrar's office kind of took that one, and our head registrar took that and had those conversations. And some were shocked, as we mentioned. They're like, what? I don't have a degree. I thought I had a degree. And others were super thrilled because they had completed 130, 140 hours and never earned a degree. And so this was like the best call they'd ever received. So it was a little bit all over the board, but definitely something that provided some excitement for those students that didn't need to do anything, if you will, and they were able to earn their degree.
We also made sure that we didn't reach out to anybody who was enrolled at another institution.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Thank you, Allison and Egan. Any other questions for Allison and Egan? Egon. So we have another one. The variety of waivers that you came up as solutions, was your faculty senate involved? Was there discussion about if those waivers watered down the degree? What strategies were used to get faculty on board?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, our faculty senate was not involved. And that was something that we talked about having a faculty member on, but because of COVID, it it just kind of got lost, if you will, in that whole thing, the timeline. Our associate provost for undergraduate studies, though, was on, and he was able to approve the course substitutions. He would normally do that if something went through the faculty process, and then a chair director denied it and the appeal would come through him. We also, as we mentioned early on, this was part of a statewide initiative. And so when we have statewide initiatives, that gives us a little bit of grace to be able to try some things out that we maybe wouldn't be able to with others. And so that was something that, that's why I guess we're at the point where we know we need to take some of these things through Faculty Senate, because that's definitely going to be important in order to get those changed for the long run. But for that pilot process, I think it also helps us, though, from the data perspective of here's how many students and here's how many by changing this policy we were able to do this. And that's something that without a project like this, we wouldn't have any mechanism to do that.
Great points. Any other questions at all? Okay, well, thank you so much to both of you for joining us. We truly appreciate it, for taking time out of your day, and I'm sure everybody's very happy to learn from your experience. So thanks again.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
sure. We'll move on to our next speakers. So we have Katie Dawson, who is the Assistant Vice President for Academic Innovation and Learning from the University of Louisiana System. And she acts as the Director of the Complete LA Initiative. She is a doctoral candidate in the Education Leadership Program at Louisiana Tech and has a bachelor's and master's in communication from Western Kentucky University. Before joining the UL system, Katie worked at the University of Louisiana Monroe as the director of ULM Online and still serves as an adjunct faculty member for their online program. Her current academic pursuits involve research to help adult learners in online programs, specifically looking at the instructional design and its effects on online instruction, as well as closing equity gaps by using OER and AER resources in teaching and course creation. And she's passionate about innovating education, student support systems, data-driven decisions, and shared governance and leadership. So thank you again, Katie, for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be with you. As Jennifer mentioned, I run the Compete LA program, which is very similar, I'm sure, to some of the initiatives that, exist at other states that look to re-engage adults who have some college but no bachelor's degree. Next slide, please. So to begin today, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on higher education in Louisiana, and more specifically, the UL system. So Louisiana has around 66 higher education institutions within the state. We generally fall under 4 different types of systems. So we have the Louisiana Community and Technical College System, the Louisiana State University System, the Southern University System, and our University of Louisiana System. Not included, not formally organized, is the Louisiana Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. So for a state with a lot going on in higher education, you might be surprised to find out that we actually are also in the ranks with the rest of the nation in having a latent adult learner population that is untapped, and that's our goal, is to attract them back. So the University of Louisiana System is composed of 9 different institutions. So despite the fact that we are all within one system, each of our institutions is unique and has their own organizational structure. So we have Grambling State University, which is also our only HBCU within our system. That's located in north central Louisiana in Grambling. Louisiana Tech University at Ruston, McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Nichols State University in Thibodaux, Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Southeastern State University in Hammond, the University of Louisiana Lafayette in Lafayette, the University of Louisiana Monroe, and then of course the University of New Orleans. So between our 9 institutions, we serve around 90,000 students within the state. We have about 4,500 faculty members between those 9 institutions and 8,000 staff members. And so, as I've mentioned, and as we're all here for, re-engaging adults is really the center of this initiative. We are 49th in the nation in educational attainment, which is not something that we say with pride. And that's because 29% of the adult population within Louisiana has some sort of post-secondary credential. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? That means that 1 in 5 adults in Louisiana have some college but no degree, which totals out to about 654,000 adults in Louisiana with some college, no degree. And so the Compete LA project was dreamed by our president of the UL system, Dr. Jim Henderson. He had an idea to re-engage, and he turned over the implementation of that idea to the Compete LA leadership team, which consists of our Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost, Dr. Janine Kahn, our Vice President for External Relations and Marketing, Cami Geisman, and our Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives, Dr. Claire Norris, and myself. And our purpose was not only to re-engage adults and grow enrollments at our 9 institutions, but also to contribute to the data and best practices that exist in higher education. And so I'm really excited to have an opportunity to kind of share with you how we've shared our story. Specifically, we're going to focus in on our annual report. So next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of background on how Compete LA works, we have a Compete LA website, CompeteLA.org. Students are directed to the website. They sign up through a long form and enter our CRM. They get matched with a coach who will help them determine their personal pathway. The coach evaluates the prior earned college credit and then evaluates the degree program options at our 9 institutions, connects the student back with the institution, is there with them through the re-enrollment process, so the application and admission process, along with getting those classes registered, and then stays connected with the student until they graduate. Now, as you probably can, the quickest path to degree is usually the one that our students are looking for and the one that we typically recommend. However, we do consider career goals and personal goals. And so if that differs, we may point a student in a different direction. But the quickest path typically is sending them back to the institution that they stopped out of originally. And so that created a clear alliance with the goals of Degrees When Due. And so we signed up to be partners with Degrees When Due, I believe, back in late 2019 or early 2020. And so what Degrees When Due has done for us and helped us with is kind of giving us a direction as we start to evaluate campus processes and policies that may perpetuate the barriers that affect adult students' return. Next slide, please. So as we work through this process, we started building the program in 2018 and its official launch was 2019. We've been through a lot and we had a lot of data to wade through. Just like the former presenters were mentioning, we wanted to re-engage stop-outs from our own institutions, but we also wanted to be able to serve the broader population of Louisiana as well. And so as we have been working out our processes and getting that underway, we decided that we needed to be able to broadcast some of the things that we were able to make happen in a short amount of time. And so the Compete LA annual report was born. It was first published this past January, and it covers really and truly the first 2 years of the program. So it's a little bit elongated for this edition, just to give that history. And so the contents tell our story. We start off by acknowledging the challenge that we have, that 49th in the nation ranking, the fact that we have 654,000 adults with some college, no degree. Then we go on to a statement from our president. And so I really liked when Leanne was talking about, go back to elementary school when you were thinking about identifying who, what, where. The who of our UL system president, Dr. Henderson, is really important because he sets the tone. And so by him making this a priority, he's bringing it to the state level and bringing it to state attention. And so he talks about the importance of college of education and how every Louisianian is entitled to a college education. And, we really do have to look beyond the 18 to 24-year-olds that we've typically recruited. We followed that with a timeline. So just giving people a basic layout of inception to the present state of the program. Then we gave statistics, like Jennifer pointed out, everybody likes numbers. So being able to give some real numbers to those different phenomena that we are tackling makes an impression. Then we went back to the storytelling with that qualitative piece with an opportunity to meet me. I had just come on. I had just started working at the UL system in January. And the really interesting and neat thing that our marketing team did was they had me give a quote from a student from a campus perspective. So since I had come from a university that was actively involved and was recruiting students back, I was able to talk about the fact that my work on my campus was valuable before Compete Louisiana became a statewide initiative. But after Compete Louisiana became a statewide initiative, the attention really was back on my office. And that was incredibly important to me because it allowed me to move some things down the line at my institution that I had beforehand not necessarily gotten very much attention or listening for. And so we also introduced all of our coaches, and the importance of that was that this is a public document. And so we want potential students to know who they're working with and be able to see that. And we also wanted to give a face to those coaches. This is a very personalized process, and we want people to know and understand that. The report finalizes with a list of our graduates in the program so far, as well as a spotlight on a student story, because that is the most important story to tell. And then a glance at how we're innovating our approach to getting students to return through the Compete LA Academy, and some of the big headlines that we were able to make in the last few years. Next slide, please. So the audience for this report was varied. First and foremost, it was for our legislators. We wanted our legislators to see the work that we were doing and why it was important. Louisiana is a state that, though we have lots of higher education around, there is not necessarily outgoing support politically for it at all times. And so we really wanted to be able to say, you've given us money in the past, or you haven't given us money in the past, and this is what we're doing to make sure that we're educating Louisiana. We wanted to be able to give it to businesses as a recruitment tool for corporate partnerships or business partnerships to attract back employees. We wanted to supply it to our own universities. So much of what happens at a university happens in a silo, and it's not necessarily something that you're thinking through or that you need to happen, but it can. And so we wanted to make sure that our campuses knew that the efforts or things that maybe we had asked them to do or asked them to change were making a difference, and that people were starting to move through this process. We wanted this to be a resource for the media. It's a big concept. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of things, lots of moving parts. You guys know this. And so we wanted to give a snapshot to our media partners so that they have a better understanding when presenting and writing these stories, and also maybe raising some interest and awareness again. And then finally, we also wanted this to be available to the greater higher ed community. We are very hopeful that this initiative is not something that will be short-lived. We have obviously short-term goals, but we also have some long-term goals as well. And so as we build and sustain this program, we are anxious to share our practices with others in higher education. So the outcomes from sharing this, Our state legislators really grasped on to this concept and were really impressed with it. We've taken some liberties through the program to make higher education more affordable. We offer a flat rate tuition to anyone in our program of $275 a credit hour. Not sure if you've looked around at online prices these days, but $275 is a pretty darn good price. And so our legislators wanted to get behind it. And so they gave us one-time money of $250,000 this year to market our program to Louisianians. It's resulted in some corporate partnerships. Most pressingly, the Louisiana state employees, the Department of Administration in our state government sent out an email to 70,000 state employees at the beginning of July. And within 6 weeks, we had around 2,000 new students enter our pipeline just from that email. Next, we're partnering with an LLC in central Louisiana called Clico, and it's a really easy sell. And this brochure has, well, our report has really helped to make that sell easier because it's digestible information in one sitting, 6 pages. And then we, again, gained more attention from state and local media outlets. So that, again, was another push to get students into our system. And obviously, it's resulted in opportunities like this to share what we're doing with a group like your group here. Next slide, please. So, sure, it was 2,000 students entered the pipeline. And to be honest, we're still getting people that are trickling in. Yeah, no problem. So our next step, we're still mapping that out and what that process will look like. We're continuing to audit and refine processes, policies, and the way that we analyze the data that we have. I really liked in the last presentation how they talked about the fact that they started noticing trends from their data and that they use that data to inform not only existing policies, but also to adjust the process to make reentry easier for adults. Same situation. We are looking at those, and it's interesting because when those changes occur, they come at the university level. So even when one institution makes some changes, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other institutions are following suit. So I definitely think there will be a case study in the future kind of talking about how long it takes for the adaptation of progressive policies and what benefits maybe those that are willing to be more innovative and try more things see and how that affects the outcomes that other universities will see once they implement similar. We're going to pursue more corporate partnerships. So the state of Louisiana was really the first. Clico is second. We are excited for a third that's up and coming. And I hope if I have the opportunity to meet you in a year, I will be able to tell you that we have 20 to 40 corporate partners. And really and truly, we're looking at that aspect because we know that money is the biggest pain point for our students. Basically 65 to 70% of the students who have already come through Compete Louisiana express an issue or concern with finances before they even get started. I'm sure several of you have dealt with students who have upwards of 100 to 150 hours of earned credit or attempted hours, which definitely limits their ability for federal financial aid. And so corporate partnerships are one way that we've realized is a way to work through those problems. If we can identify organizations within Louisiana that give some sort of employee tuition benefit, whether it's a tuition reimbursement, a tuition waiver, study time, class time during work time, or textbook help, that is a way to tap into an organization where we have mutual goals, education for their employees, but also a way to move students through a little bit quicker, because those without the support of their employer are typically left to figure out finances on their own, which can slow them in the process or create step outs even when they do return. We're looking for more strategic partnerships. And by strategic partnerships, that really can mean anything, whether it's an organization that can set us up with resources. So for example, we have a good relationship with Verizon from our system. And one of the things that we have on our wish list of asks is service for hotspots, either at a drastically reduced price or even free for our students that are going through this program. Strategic partnerships can be things like partnering with IHEP, partnering with Quality Matters, partnering with WCET, and then of course grants. We're looking for opportunities to provide resources for our students. And then when I say provide resources, you may be thinking, well, you know, what do you mean? What does that look like? We have a really interesting challenge in Louisiana. We know that adults are most friendly towards online education. It's the most flexible pathway for them to return and finish their degree. But what do you do when you have an adult who's excited, ready, and willing, but there's no internet available at their home or within their town, or it's limited? And so one of the things that we are currently working on is actually physically mapping the digital divide that exists in Louisiana. And we can use this map to create a strategic plan on recruitment and re-engagement with adult students, because it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to send a postcard or to digitally market to a sect of students that may be ready and willing, but unable to participate in our program because they just don't have the physical resources to do it. Next slide, please. And so when you build out a map like this, I zoned in on ULM, my institution that I came from. And looking at this map, you'll see that there are dark dots. There are Compete Louisiana Cs, and cell phone towers, as well as broadband access points. And what that shows is that the yellow and the green, yellow is 40% of the population or less has access to Wi-Fi and internet. The green is 60% of the population or less has access. And you can see our institution kind of in the middle of all of that. Those gray dots are the adult population, 25 years and older of Louisianians, and that's pulled from census data. And the Compete LA turquoise Cs are for the representation of the number of adults who live within that region who would be qualified for our program. The cell phones are really interesting. The tiny cell phones represent populations of 5,000 that are depending on their cell phone for their means of internet access. And the larger the cell phone is, the more people that are dependent on that device to receive their internet. And then the little broadband markers that are in blue represent public libraries. And so what resources exist and are available that we can route students to if internet becomes an issue. And so one of the things that we think is really important is that, you know, we know that we want to attract and retain students. It's not enough to us to recruit them back to our institutions. They need to finish. And so in order to do that, we have to be prepared to help them with those resources or give them direction when they come to our universities and lack those resources that we all sometimes take for granted. And so the data is giving us the direction and the student stories are giving us purpose, and being able to share those is allowing us to bring more people on board with our mission, whether it's at a government level, an education level, or a company level, with re-engaging our adult employees. So anybody have any questions? It's a lot to digest.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was really informative and helpful. Yeah, definitely. Please put any questions in the chat, or you can come off mute.
I just find this so inspirational in how you tell the story. so compelling, and how you're getting people to engage with you on the issue. It's blown away. I'm wondering what I'm doing with all my time.
Well, thank you. It is most definitely a joint effort. I am privileged to get to be a face on this program, but there are dozens of people that are making the gears work. One thing that I think it's really important to point out that I didn't do a very good job in my PowerPoint of doing is that we do have the UL system implementation team, but we also have campus leads at each campus that are the champion for this effort on their campus. And each campus has their own implementation team, and depending on the campus, it's a different composition. Some institutions are engaging employees within their online offices solely and bringing in people from admissions or advisement when needed. Others are having a more holistic approach and creating teams from across their institution to be involved. And so, you know, the more people that you can bring on, the better, to be honest. If you can tell your story in a compelling way to your colleagues that makes them passionate about what you're doing, they may not have a hands-on approach, but their support and their word of mouth can speak volumes.